In this video, we're going to start working on splitting the RLCI application into a client part and a server part. RLCI is a continuous integration system that I'm working on. I've made several videos about it here on my YouTube channel, and you can find the links to all of it in the README file on the GitHub page. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Why do we need a client-server architecture? When I've done some changes in the RLCI repo, I run 0pi integrate to integrate those changes. That will SSH into the CI server and trigger the RLCI pipeline. The pipeline starts, runs tests, and merges my changes if everything looks good. The problem arises if two people run 0pi integrate at the same time. That would create two parallel processes of RLCI trying to merge and push changes at the same time. The last one to push will get an error because other changes were pushed first. How can we solve this? We must queue up integration requests so that only one set of changes is processed at a time. One way to do that is to split RLCI into a client and a server. 0pi integrate would still SSH into the CI server and call RLCI to trigger a pipeline. But instead of actually starting the pipeline, it will make a request to the server to start the pipeline, and the server will only process one request at a time. There will only be one server process. Work on this split is going to be done in 3 parts, and in this first part in this video we're going to have a look at what is actually needed to implement this and make some preparations. So let's dive in. So let's have a look at the main application, the command line application. It's right here, RLCI app. So currently, let's have a look at the first tests. Pipeline triggering. I can trigger different pipelines. So this will invoke the command line application, and we assert that something was printed indicating that this pipeline was run. But now when we would like to separate the command line application and the engine part into 2 different processes, this is no longer what we want to do. So instead we want to write something like has server request, and then something like this, maybe test pipeline. So we want to assert that when we run the command line in trigger mode, a request is sent to the server, and this is the payload, like a JSON object that we send. Something like that, and both of these tests can be removed because they will longer be active. So let's start a to-do file of things we want to do, because we need to do these in a specific order so that everything works all the time. If we start to modify the command line application here, everything will break because there's no server. So let's see. In the RLCI app, we want to replace test with server request test. That's one thing we want to do. Let's have a look at what's next. I write a report of the pipeline run. So for some reason the functionality to write this index.html file report ended up in the command line application, and I think this is the wrong place for it. In a new scenario, the command line application would just invoke the server and say, hey, run this pipeline. And there will be no way for the command line application to read from the database and generate this report. So this should probably just move into the engine. So let's write let's do for that. Move report generation into engine. Let's see about this. I exit with server when triggered pipeline succeeds. This is still valid. I exit with 1 if triggered pipeline fails. This is still valid as well, except the simulate pipeline failure must work differently. It should simulate that the response from the server was a failure. So simulate pipeline failure should simulate error response from server. And I think we also need to add a case. Add case where server communication fails. So this right here is indicating that the pipeline failed, but if there's even no way to contact the server, if the communication with the server fails, I think there should also be exit 1 here. And the rest, let's see. It's okay. And these are other things. Okay. So if we scroll down here to the implementation, we can also see these ones. So here, the command line application has an instance of the database, and it can access the database and do stuff with it. When the command line application just calls into the server, I mean, potentially they are even on different machines, right? So the command line application can't access the database. So these pipelines must be moved to engine as well. So let's write that, replace move report generator, move pipeline saves into engine. Yeah, they have to move as well. Okay, so let's look at what we got. Replace test with server request test. This one depends on that we have a server running. Have engine as server running. This we can do right now. This we can do right now. And this one right here also. All these three depend on having a server. Before we can start working on rewriting the client, we need to have a server. And before we can start work on the server, we have to move some parts of the RLCI application into the engine part. So first, let's have a look at how to move the saves of the pipelines into the engine class. So just move these. It fails. And when we instantiate the engine, just move them here as well. And now this one right here is not found, so let's move that one as well. Down here. And it passes. So from the command lines applications point of view, like before the pipelines were created up here when the app was instantiated, and now they're created when we instantiate the engine in a trigger. There will still, like, the functionality will be pretty much the same, except we just move the instantiation further down the stack. And I'm pretty confident that the tests will cover this, so since they pass, let's just commit this. The final piece that doesn't really belong in the command line application is the report generation. So let's move that to the engine class as well. So this is the report generation. Let's remove it. Oh, and run the tests. That should fail, right? And let's see, there should be a trigger here at the end. Okay, so the report should always be generated, no matter if there's a... let's try. So let's add a finally. And include it there. Maybe it's try except finally. There we go. Okay, so engine has no attribute file system. So let's fix that. File system, self file system. Let's add it here. File system. Trigger in test mode. Set it here as well. File system is file system create in memory, I think we can do. File system is not defined. Infrastructure. File system. There we go. And let's just see if we have a test case for this part right here. Yeah, so this will fail. All right. So now we moved the implementation of the report generation down here, but the test is still up here. I think we should move the test as well, because it's no longer the responsibility of the command line application to write the report, but instead it's the responsibility of the engine. So let's see what we got. Triggering. Let's see. I write a report. Yeah, log which pipeline I triggered. Let's just copy this for now. I write a report of the pipeline run. So here we should do engine dot trigger in test mode. Test pipeline. Trigger. Let's see. Trigger file system read. Test pipeline. What is test pipeline? Name test. So this should just be test. There's no file system here, which makes sense. So let's extract that to file system. Oops. Let's see if we have it. Creating memory, file system, and then file system. Return it here. Let's just format this. Last run pipeline test, and we expected What did we write? I want to do report this. But test is not in report, so what does the report look like? With all small letters. So what is this test pipeline? Oh yeah, so the name of the pipeline is here. It's hard-coded in this one, trigger. Say pipeline test. Okay, so it should be test. I'm going to report on the pipeline run. Cool. And now we can remove this test right here. And there we go. Let's commit.
That's it for preparations. In the next video we'll start working on the server, and in the third video we'll start to rewrite the client to actually call the server instead. So I'll see you in 1 week.